I'm so super excited to share with you today the easiest gluten-free sourdough starter you can make. And if you're not really into measuring and discarding and feeding, then this is really the video for you. If you're new here on my channel, my name is Anya and I love sharing our heritage homemaking journey made simple, and I have a lot of recipes. Now, if you are a regular here on my channel, you may know that I have a very popular video in which I'm showing you a super simple method how to make a sourdough starter without measuring, without feeding, and without any discarding. And yes, it can be done. Now, I have had a lot of requests from some of you asking me if I could show you how to make a gluten-free sourdough starter using the same or similar method. And when I started, I wasn't really sure if my regular method with regular gluten-based flours would actually work for a gluten-free flour, but I have set out, and this is what I'm going to share with you today. The ingredients are really simple. Here's actually my sourdough starter that I made, but what you will need is a gluten-free flour, and I chose an organic all-purpose gluten-free flour made by Arrowhead Mills. It's a combination of various flours. It has organic rice flour in it, organic brown rice flour, organic tapioca flour, organic millet flour, organic inulin, and xanthan gum. I like this one because it is a 1-to-1 replacement for any white flours you might use. And the other ingredient you need is cultured buttermilk. I always get a lot of questions about the buttermilk. No, for this recipe, you cannot use the curdled buttermilk where you're adding an acid to milk, such as lemon juice or vinegar. It has to be cultured, meaning that there are some active live cultures, which it will say on the package here. If you don't have any buttermilk or you don't know where to get it, I have some recommendations what you can use a little bit later here in this video. And I'm going to show you my super simple method. All I do is I'm just adding about maybe a cup or so, maybe this isn't even a cup, of the buttermilk to my jar. And I always like glass because then I can really see what's going on. And I'm adding some of the gluten-free flour. I told you that this is not about having to measure anything, so I'm just always going by feel, and I'm adding just enough so that I will get a thick pancake batter-like consistency. All I'm doing is I'm giving it a stir to check my consistency. You can see that there's a lot on the sides here, and I ended up getting it a little bit thicker than I like, so I'm just adding just a dash of filtered water. You want to use filtered water or bottled water, but you don't want to use tap water that might have chlorine in it, because that will work against the good beneficial bacteria you're trying to cultivate. Oh, and oops, and I need a little bit more water. Again, I'm just going by feel, and that's why I'm not using any measurements or telling you to use measurements. So I'm going to give this a good stir, which is really helpful to get this all going, and I might need a little bit more water. You can go all buttermilk. However, I have found that diluting the buttermilk for the gluten-free flour actually works a little bit better in this recipe than going all buttermilk. So there you go. And then I remove my spoon. You can absolutely use a stainless steel or metal spoon while you're stirring it up. It's not going to hurt your sourdough starter. And I will put a cover on top. That can be a beeswax wrap or a coffee filter, a paper towel. It can just be really anything just to keep dirt from flying in and just to keep it lightly covered. It doesn't need to be a tight lid, and I always like to put a rubber band around it, and I leave it in a warm spot. Now, when I started this sourdough starter, I set it in my sunny windowsill, And I have found that in the summer that was a little bit more heat than my sourdough starter really needed. So I have just placed it on my counter. I always advise people from having other ferments close by, such as sauerkraut. So I always like to keep them somewhat separate, maybe 3 or 4 feet. And then I moved my sourdough starter to the counter, and all I really did is every other day or so, I would check on it by simply looking at it, taking my spoon, give it a quick stir, and usually on the first few days, there's not much happening. I like to smell it, and if it starts having a bit of a sour smell, then that's really what you're going for. And often it is just developing a nose for the kind of smell you need. This is maybe day 5 or 6. Again, I do have that hooch on top because I didn't touch it the day before. And now I've decided to just add a little bit more flour, just a little bit, to make it a little bit thicker and to help the good bacteria along, the yeasts and the other good bacteria. And again, stirring it. I can see some bubbles already, which is super encouraging. You can see that, the bubbles rising to the top. And it has that thick consistency. Here it is. It looks a little bit different than a sourdough starter made with regular wheat-based or einkorn flour, but it has a nice, pleasant, sour taste and nice, pleasant, sour smell. And if you hold your ear close to the jar, you can actually hear it. And I'm often tapping it on the bottom to listen for that hollow sound that tells me that the sourdough starter is ripe. And here it is after, I want to say, probably 7 days. I'm not so exact with it. It has that very characteristic smell. I have to say that maybe a day or 2 ago, it almost had a bit of an alcoholic smell, and I just kept it going, and now it is ready to be used. Now, of course, you can use the whole sourdough starter if you only want to use it once. However, if you want to keep it going, I do have a method, which I'm sharing in this video here, in which I'm showing you how you can keep your sourdough starter without any feedings and without any discards. And I also have, because sometimes it can be a little bit harder to visualize how exactly my process works, I have a downloadable printout of the life cycle of the sourdough starter that you can find in the box below this video, that you can print out at home and keep it so that you can keep your sourdough starter going. And to see what's possible with your gluten-free sourdough starter, I have made some scones, and I'm going to show you how I bake them. To the bowl of my KitchenAid stand mixer, I add some flour, sugar, baking powder, and a little bit of salt. I give this a quick stir just to mix it up. Then I'm adding some fresh homemade butter and 1 cup of sourdough starter, the gluten-free sourdough starter that we just made. I will mix this on a low speed and then increase it to high until I have a uniform dough. Sometimes I have to scrape it off the sides just a little bit to make sure that everything is incorporated and a very uniform dough. Then I line a cookie sheet with some parchment paper and just press the dough into a disc. You can make that as flat or high as you like. I always like it a little bit rustic because that means it's homemade. With a knife, I cut 6 pretty much even pieces. with a pastry brush, I brush some heavy cream or whipping cream on the top. That makes it extra delicious. And I'll bake it at 425 for about 17 to 25 minutes or until the top is golden brown. When the scones are ready, I take them out of the oven. Look at them, beautiful brown. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I have a lot more sourdough recipes in this playlist. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen, and I'll see you in the next video.